Hey everybody, it's Jay Baer at Convince and Convert, joined today by a very special guest, brand new author, gadfly, man about town, consistent wearer of black, John Morgan, who is the author of Brand Against the Machine and also the proprietor of the consultancy by the same name. John, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am excellent. Tell me about the book. It's been out, 2 weeks now? Something like that?
Yeah, just a few weeks, and it's been going great, and I'm certainly excited that, to have it out there.
And, you've been doing consulting for a long time, things like that. Why would you possibly take your limited resources and choose to write a book?
Honestly, it was first. I mean, the real reason is because the publisher called and said, "Would you like to write a book?"
They forced you to do it. They forced you to do it. I understand.
It's always been the back burner idea. One day I'll write a book. You know what I mean? I've always thought one day there'd be a whole shelf full of books that I wrote. But honestly, one of the reasons that I wanted to and do it now was I got really pissed off because I'm a huge fan of books and I read 2 or 3 a week, and so many of them are bad, or you read them and it's 1 or 2 ideas that you kind of get from it. And, I hear people say, well, if you get one good idea, it's worth it. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. That's a lot of time to actually read.
Yeah, it may be worth the $20, but it's not worth the time it took you.
Exactly. So I wanted to do a book that was different, that was full of way more than one idea, or one key takeaway for people.
Yeah, and it absolutely is that. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. It is a book that is, literally chock full of stuff. It's 60 chapters or something like that. And it reminds me, I know you're friends with Scott Stratton and his book Unmarketing. It's structured a little bit like Scott's book, where it's lots of shorter passages that don't necessarily tie together in sort of a narrative sweep or sort of from a beginning, middle, and end. You could literally pick up this book and turn to any page and start reading, and you would get stuff out of it. I think that's a really interesting approach to writing a book.
Yeah, and I wrote it that way for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted to get as much strategy in there as I could, because I wanted it to be better than other books, so I wanted to make sure it was almost overwhelming with things you could do. But also because of the way we digest content today. We're used to reading blog posts, right? And, so we're not used to reading, one chapter that's 20 pages all about the same idea. And if there was a third reason, it's because I'm not that great of a storyteller where I can give someone one idea and then explain it 9 different ways. Yeah, I'm just, here it is. Either take it or leave it. That's it. So I had to write the book in my own style.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I didn't think it was going to turn out right.
Yeah, it's super helpful in that way. One of the other things I really like is, and I haven't really seen it done this exact way. I'll hold this up. In the actual book itself, you've got sort of key little sentences that you have kind of highlighted and outlined. It's almost like a written down tweet, which I think is really, really smart. It's sort of those takeaways that jump off the page. How did you come up with that plan?
Well, I was going to tell you, you got the scoop because this is the first time I've shared this with anybody. The secret to that is actually I went back and found all of the things I had ever written on Twitter that were retweeted the most and put those in the book.
No way. Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then I knew, okay, people are going to like it. So if 82 people retweeted this and it's in the book, then maybe the book won't suck. So I literally, I went back. Probably 90% of the things in those boxes were tweets previously. So I knew it resonated with people. I knew that was a message that made sense and people got what I was saying.
That is such an interesting story. I just thought that you kind of took things that you thought you were pretty interesting in the book and sort of wrote them like a tweet, but it was actually the opposite. That is really, really fascinating. So, okay, let me drill down on that a little bit.
Okay.
Obviously, you included those popular tweets in the book. Before you wrote the book, or when you were outlining the book, or working on your book proposal, did you take those popular tweets and then structure the book around them, or did you just sprinkle them into the book in the appropriate places?
Yeah, it was more of the sprinkle. Like you mentioned earlier, I've been doing this a long time. So I knew from the beginning what strategies would go in the book. And so basically then it was just, anytime I've tweeted about something, because that's something I teach or I, consult with people on. So I knew, okay, when I talk about that section, this will go here. You know what I mean? And just, they just sort of fit in. So I wasn't necessarily having to put them in and then figure out what to say around them. they just instantly kind of fit into some of the things that I talk about in speaking or consulting or whatever.
Fantastic. Tell me about the audience for the book. Who do you think is the ideal reader for Brand Against the Machine?
I think it's probably, I'll tell you who's not the ideal reader, and that's the person who's, I want to be a business owner, I want to be an entrepreneur, I don't know what I want to do. This isn't like the help you find your passion and calling,
Right.
kind of book. I'm not good at helping those people.
Right.
This is
It's
definitely
not Crush It, for example.
Right, yeah. This is definitely for somebody who knows what they want to do, and maybe they're even doing it well, but they need to do it bigger, or it's kind of going along this line, they're not really happy, and they need to really crank things up and actually, make it a big success. It's more for that person. So that can be a small business. It can also be a large business. It can even be the solo entrepreneur. I tried to write it, where it kind of would adapt, each of these strategies to everybody. Because I've consulted, like you have. A lot of times we consult with these big companies, and these solo entrepreneurs sometimes forget that they can easily implement what the big guys are doing.
Yeah.
So that was the thing, is I kind of wanted to take what I talk about in closed door meetings with the big guys and bring it down to a way that the solo entrepreneur, the blogger, whatever, could actually implement in their own business.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way I took it as well. That group, the people who are sort of self-directed and can determine just on their own how to handle their business, if you will, it really could pull a lot out of this. The corporate marketer who's, director of marketing at some big company who is sort of told what to do, I think might have more of a challenge putting some of these principles into place.
Certainly.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book, which is really fascinating, is that attention doesn't equal trust. We pay a lot of attention to garnering attention now. Here we are doing a video interview so that you can get attention and I can get attention for giving you attention. But that doesn't equal trust, you say. So if attention doesn't equal trust, what does gain trust?
Yeah, well, I think that consistent attention can, and it goes back to providing value, right? So let me give you an example. We think of branding in the old 1980s corporate. Let's do billboards. Let's do Super Bowl ads.
We need a slogan.
Yeah, exactly. That's attention, but just because people know about you doesn't mean that they trust you, right? There's not necessarily loyalty there because we don't know anyone at the company. We don't feel any rapport with the company. So that's when, I talk about in the book that the future of business is marketing with people and not at them. That's then let me shift to, you actually did a blog post recently I was reading, and some people were, leaving comments and things, and you come in and you were commenting. So, not only is there that engagement, so a relationship kind of building, but you even mentioned to one of these people that your trust, or their trust in you, that's your business. That's all you've got, right? So you're someone that gets it. But a lot of these other companies, when they think of branding, it's just, let me blast my crap out at everybody and hope it sticks in a few places. But the problem with that is, again, just because we know who you are doesn't mean we're doing business with you. We've got to, know, like, and trust you. People forget about that element.
It's a really good point, too, that you, on a related topic that you make in the book, that not everybody is a good customer. It doesn't matter what company you are or what you sell. Not everybody is an appropriate customer, and we fall into that trap sometimes. We get so desperate as business people or as companies that, okay, we need to make sure that everybody knows about us because everybody might want to buy from us. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there who just aren't right for you, and that's actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
That's right. I mean, when we have a bad client, someone that's not that ideal fit, then we're not doing them a good service because we don't like working with them, and, we're miserable. And then that affects the clients we do like working with. And I had that because I used to own a real estate business. Certainly I had a client that, legitimately had to be Satan himself. This guy was horrible. He blackmailed me. He threatened to hit me. You name it, and this guy did it. But I, at the time, was financially broke. I had no choice but to work with him. And that lesson has stuck with me because all I told myself is from now on, I've got to work with better people, better quality people, and not have myself be in a position where I'm forced to work with whoever just because they've got money. That can't be the qualifier. It's important because you do want people to buy stuff from you over and over again, but there's so many other elements, to it. And just a quick example, in consulting, I know you run into this as well. Just because a client pays doesn't make them a good client. They need to also take action. Yeah. If they don't implement the ideas, then they come back to us and say, no, your stuff doesn't work. And it's like, well, you didn't do it. That's why. So it's important that we not only pick clients that can pay the fees, but will also actually do something so that they get the value.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. People ask me from time to time to sort of, how do I measure success, or how do I judge myself by clout score or whatever? I'm like, no, it's only two things. I've been a consultant for a long time. And it's only two things. It's one, can you spend your time how you want to spend your time? And two, can you pick your own clients? Yeah. And if you get those two things done, the rest is just gravy.
That's right. And I think people sometimes get in that situation where they're so desperate to work with anybody, like you were saying, that now all of a sudden even the quality of their brand is suffering, right? Because they're just trying to get anybody. So again, you don't want anybody. If you want better clients, build a better brand that's going to attract those people. No one goes and test drives a Ferrari unless they can kind of afford a Ferrari, right? It's just you're pre-qualified. They're developing a quality brand, so then the clients are already of a certain, quality, and also sort of pre-qualifying themselves before they're ever even on the sales floor.
Yep. Most important word in business is no.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so you said earlier that you're not a great storyteller, and I absolutely disagree. You are selling yourself far too short. My favorite story in the book is not a business story at all, or I guess it is tangentially, but it's the story about your dad, who started Morgan Electric there in Nashville. And I actually liked the story so much that when I read the book, and you can see maybe I've got like 25 different pages, sort of dog-eared marked here. I devoured this thing. And I told my kids this story. That's how much it affected me at dinner the other night. That your father, when he went on the first date with your mother, did not know what pizza was. That's how small the town was that he grew up in.
That is correct. In fact, he grew up on a farm in a place called Gainesboro, Tennessee, that even today, I'm not even sure if it's on the map at all. In fact, they were so poor, because he's got like 6 or 7 brothers and sisters, so there was a lot of them, that one year for Christmas, their presents were empty cans. That, because they made noise, you could bang them, like that was it. And like they were happy with it. Which is, to me, I grew up on Nintendo and Sega. And
I'm totally doing that this year. Empty cans. We're going to turn this tide the other way.
Right, yeah. Let me know how that goes for you.
That would be a blog post right there. Empty cans.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I'm glad that story resonated with you, because honestly, that was one that I hadn't shared with anyone. Because my dad worked so much in his business, and still does today, our relationship suffered a little bit. My parents are still together. I see my dad weekly, but it's not like we're close. My dad was just always, gone working. But to see what he's built entirely on personality, because he didn't have the education, he didn't have the tools. My dad just started using a cell phone last year. Wow. Yeah, exactly. It's a miracle that he even does. And we're trying to get him now to send text messages. That's not going well at all. But he grew up from a different time. So you're right. He grew up in an area where when he moved to outside Nashville, to him that was the big city. He didn't know what movies were. He didn't even know what pizza was. He had to find a way to kind of fit into a world that wasn't just going to make room for him, especially in business, right? But my dad has the personality where I'm not going to meet a stranger. I will make them laugh. I will make them like me. I will allow them to get to know me, and then they're going to trust me. And that's what he did. And he built, this very successful business, based on those principles. And I think sometimes, especially now, like in the internet age, we forget that, the whole do business with people like and trust is never going away ever. Yeah. We're not going to wake up one day and say, I'm going to do business with the people I hate. That's never happening. But we let the internet, and even social media think that that's real relationships, and it is, but sometimes you still gotta get on the phone or meet in person, or what I mean, like really allow yourself.
It works the exact same way. The difference is that now the people that we know, like, and trust are much farther flung, right? Amber, my co-author Amber Naslund, said this to me one time, actually, when I interviewed her live on Twitter. This is years ago, long before we wrote the book. And she said something that has stuck with me to this day, and I say this in speeches a lot. She said what she loved about social networking and social media is that her relationships are no longer dictated by geography or circumstance. And it's so true, right? Because the people that we know, like, and trust, like in your dad's case, that trust, that like, that know is literally face to face. And now, while face to face is still optimal, we can build relationships like you and I have more virtually, and other people have, and that changes the game quite a bit.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Scott Stratton earlier, and here's a great example of this. I knew Scott through Twitter for a long time.
Everybody knows Scott through Twitter.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I knew him old school, right? Like back when no one was listening. And so we had exchanged emails. We had interviewed each other. We kind of felt like we knew each other, had never met face to face. Last year, he comes to Nashville, in support of his book, because I was hosting this whole book event for him, and the guy stayed at my house.
Awesome.
We had not met face to face. My wife was like, "Who's coming over? Like, what is this?" It was this whole weird thing. But yet, the moment we met, it was like we had been friends for 20 years, right? It just fit. And man, what a phenomenal time we live in, that me in Nashville can meet someone in Canada, and even build that kind of friendship or relationship, where it's not just about business. It's actually a real friendship, and those kind of things. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And so that's why I really wanted to share the story about my dad in the book, was because, I realized almost in writing it, not to sound like, the writer who has this moving moment, but all of a sudden I'm writing that story and didn't realize actually how proud of my dad I was until I sat down to write it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It comes through, very much so. One of the things that I thought was curious that you mention in the book is sort of the notion that some people sort of ruin their personal brand, if you will, in social media by complaining all the time, by being like Debbie Downer, and that nobody wants to sort of be around the negative guy. And so you are fairly clear in the book about asking people to stay positive wherever possible in their social media interactions. But yet a few pages later, you talk about people making sure that they are authentic and truthful in social media. And so I'm not sure how those two things work together, because sometimes we are authentically pissed off or authentically upset.
That's true. I think there's a balance, though. If you're always that person that's complaining and crying and whining about everything, just like any real life social situation, you're not the person people want to hang around. You're not the person in the party that everyone wants to go and, hang out with, right?
Right.
So that's the thing, is we just have to remember that when we're online, we are always on. And every single tweet or Facebook post or whatever affects our brand. Positively or negatively, it does have this effect. And so that's the thing. Sometimes we just forget that. We think because social media gives us a voice that we have something to say. It's like, maybe not. And, maybe partly it's where I've worked with so many businesses. I know that, yes, customers are going to complain, but there's two sides to every story. And so a lot of times someone will, say, "Oh, I've got this horrible service at this restaurant," and they're blasting the restaurant on Twitter. And I'll ask them, I'll be like, "Well, what did the restaurant say when you told them, you were upset?" And they're like, "Well, we didn't tell them." And it's like, That's really not fair. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not fair. But also even though that happens, it also just comes back to, I've had Facebook friends who I know in real life, like real life, friends, who just every single post is complaining about their boss or their day or the drive to work or whatever. And I'm like, all right, I'm unfriending this person or hiding them or whatever, because who wants that? None of us go on, social media to see the negativity. So I guess the flip side of that is, like you're talking about, being authentic. If it's actually you to always complain and whine about stuff, you've got other issues besides worrying about your brand and social media, and those things. So it's not that, look, you can complain, I've done it, that's part of life. We're never 100% happy, right? But I think it's just that line of remembering, wait a minute, your prospects are watching this. And so people are always trying to get a feel for what you're like in real life. So make sure you're always putting yourself in the best light.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, internet has a long memory, right? You have to assume that everybody's going to see every tweet or status update. And of course, there are lots of stories, and more all the time, about people losing accounts or being fired or whatever for some tweet that was inappropriate or misconstrued or what have you.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, like you said, we see it every single day. And I think there's also, by the way, we always preach that we want people to be authentic, but we don't. Right. We want them to be our version of it, right? Like, if you're feeling bad, we want to hear that you're sick. We don't want to hear that you've got diarrhea.
Right.
You know, there is a line. We want this magical version, you know, of being authentic, right? And that's hard for a lot of people, especially in business, to understand. You know, there's people who I know who half of their tweets are about drinking beer, you know, getting drunk, looking for beer, who's got beer, you know, all that stuff. The other half of their tweets are trying to promote their business.
Do you have to tweet about where to find beer now? That seems like it's a fairly common circumstance. Like that wouldn't be that hard, right? Like
it shouldn't be, right? They've clearly got
unless you're like 16, then it's a different story.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's like, you know, I see these tweets and they're trying to, you know, get business, and it's like you probably wouldn't have to tweet that stuff if you'd shut up about always wanting to be drunk.
Yeah. Right.
You know, so again, we were always on. People are always paying attention.
No, it's a good point. We say authentic and we throw that word out there, but we don't really mean it and we don't really want it. And the same thing is true with transparency, right? We talk about being transparent, and we can't, nor do we actually want it. Beth Hart at one point said, what we really want is translucency, right? That we want some level of being able to see through, but we don't want, you know, the full deal, because it's ridiculous and scary, and it's not what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, here's a great example. I know a guy who wrote on Facebook just like a week or two ago. His exact post was, I just lost a client. Do you want to take their spot? And it's like, okay. Right? Yeah. Here's like the worst.
Oh, it's so awesome. Social media is just heaven for the passive aggressive. It's fantastic.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, great that you're being authentic and transparent, but no one wants to work with the person who's clearly not, you know, successful or making things happen, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like you got to make sure you're always putting your brand in the right light and the right positioning. And so it's that stuff. And it's like, you know, that person probably meant well, you know, with it.
Yeah.
They didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But it's just your reaction was everybody's reaction.
Fantastic. Well, it is a excellent book. I recommend you pick it up. You will learn a lot. It's a quick read because you can dive in and out, as I mentioned. John Morgan's Brand Against the Machine. There it is, right there. Pick it up. Amazon, bookstores, you know, skywriting, Renaissance fairs, whatever. It'll be out there. Congratulations on the book. I'm really proud of it.
Hey, thanks so much.
Cheers.